Welcome to Bonnie's Beat. I'm your host, Bonnie Squires. We're coming to you from Radnor Studio 21 in the heart of downtown Wayne. And we like to showcase people who are doing important things for our community, whether they're in academia, whether they're in sports, whether they're prize-winning authors, whether they're heads of charities. And today, we're very lucky because we imported someone from Florida, Sarah Franco, who's the founding executive director of JAFCO, that's Jewish Adoption and Family Care Options, based in Sunrise, Florida. She flew in from Florida just to do our show. So, Sarah, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
And
Great.
Truth in Advertising. I'm very involved with JAFCO, and I'm vice president of the Northeast chapter. And tell us how you came to be the founding executive director of such an important agency.
Well, you know, some things happen because they're meant to be, I think. And I don't think it was ever my intent to become the executive director, but foster care and adoption has always been something that has been very close to my heart, and it's always been the career that I've chosen. And I think initially I thought it was a choice that I made just by myself, but I'm a second-generation Holocaust survivor. And so my parents were picked up by a Jewish agency after their parents had been killed in the Holocaust and were taken care of. So I think it was meant for me to kind of finish the circle for my family and help take care of Jewish children who don't have a place to live. So I think that's how it kind of came about, but more on a more practical basis. In Florida about 25 years ago, we were coming across some Jewish children who were in state foster care, living in lovely families, but non-Jewish families. And we felt that that child abuse really strips a child of all of the aspects of their identity, their home, their family, their community, their school, their friends, their pet, their bed. And the one aspect that we could save, perhaps, would be the piece of their identity that comes from their religion, their culture, and their heritage. So we felt that if we could organize a community to come together and provide that service, that we could keep the child's identity intact while they're in foster care, while their family's healing, and while a permanent plan is being made for them.
Every time I tell someone that I'm very involved with JAFCO, and I tell them what the initials stand for, initially it was Jewish Adoption and
And foster.
and foster care. Now it's Jewish Adoption and Family Care because the services have been expanded.
Correct.
They'll say Jewish children were abused, Jewish parents beat their children, sexually abused them, administered drugs, or the parents took drugs and couldn't take care of them. And I say, the Jewish community is like every other community. They have their problems. And children are the victims very often.
Right, that's so true. And I think I think it's important to realize that the families that we work with they're not bad people. They're wonderful people who've lost their way due to mental illness usually.
Lost. Yeah. I like that word lost because that's true. They obviously lost their way. Although some of them I would characterize as bad people. I mean, the video that you produce every year that we show at our local events, there's not a dry eye in the house when we finish hearing the stories that the children are able to articulate about what happened to them and why they're on the campus of JAFCO in Sunrise. I was fortunate enough that when my husband and I were in Florida a couple of years ago, we got a personal tour of the facility by Sarah. And let me tell you, it's so amazing. There are 6 group homes on the campus. It's a gorgeous campus. There's a beautiful building where is the intake, and there's a synagogue in there, and there's a cafeteria, and there's a closet with any size clothing for any size child you ever would want.
Right.
And there's another closet that has any toy you can think of that's ever been invented, by Hasbro or any other, toy manufacturer. And the colors and the designs, just amazing. But also, and this is what really moved us, in that building, there is an emergency shelter. Tell us who gets sent to the emergency shelter, Sarah.
Yeah, so the emergency shelter is a place that is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We don't close ever, not for Yom Kippur, not for Rosh Hashanah, ever. And basically,
Not for Christmas, because it's not just for Jewish children that are sent there. It's for anybody that the court says needs to be taken away
right.
from.
Yeah, we don't discriminate. You know, our mission is to ensure that Jewish children have a Jewish place to call home. But as a Jewish community, it's our pleasure, truly, to serve any child in need. And the shelter allows us to always have a place in the Jewish community and outside of the Jewish community for a child who does not have a place to live. So the moment they're abused, the state is called. They decide if the child is going to be what we call sheltered, and if they need a place to live for a night, up to 30 days, then they can come to the shelter. And on occasion, if there's a shortage of foster homes, currently we have 2 sibling groups of 4 who've been with us for over a year, because they're looking for a family to keep them together.
To keep all 4 of them. Oh, that's a tough order.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it is, but the most important piece is that any of the children that are at JAFCO in the shelter or the group home or in our foster care program, the level of neglect and abuse that they suffered would be serious enough that they could have accidentally at least lost their life. So we're very cognizant of that with every child that comes in. So we have a newborn little 4-day-old baby there currently, and we have children all the way up to 20.
When my husband and I visited, I've talked about this often. He looked like he was maybe a month old. It turned out it was a little African-American baby. He was 4 months old. And I asked Sarah, why is he shaking? She says, it's drug withdrawal. The mother was a drug addict, and the court took the baby away. But the baby was dressed in the most gorgeous hand-knit little cap and outfit and booties, because you have an army of volunteers that knit and sew and create things. How many volunteers do you have in the course of a year?
There are thousands of people who are involved with JAFCO. We've been so fortunate. Our model really was a community-based model, and our feeling was that it should be a community that takes care of its children. And truly, truly, the South Florida community has stepped up, and now also in Philadelphia, the community has rallied for the past 7 years, and to the point now where we're ready to start really offering some services as well. But all of the things that we have for the children, the clothing and toys that you mentioned, are all donated. Some of them are slightly used, but we really, really value that the community does that. Even now, if we have a shortage, if we get a bunch of babies in and we run out of diapers, we'll send out an email, and people are actually drop shipping with Amazon, because there's no shipping charge. So people will send from Philadelphia, from all over, and to the point where we have to say we have enough. We end up with more than we need. So it's very heartwarming to see that the community really does care about the children, and that they really do take ownership. And that's really what our dream was, and it's happening, and we're hoping that we're going to be able to share that dream up here now that we've opened our office, and really to specialize very, very specifically in allowing families who are struggling to come to us and to ask for help, because it's very, very difficult to ask for help when your family is in trouble like that. You're not sure what's going to happen. Is the state going to come and take away your child?
Right.
Will you ever get them back? And of course, you know, as social workers, we know that the goal of foster care, even at the state level, is always reunification. But families tend to feel like that might not happen. So approaching...
That's very interesting that you said the goal is reunification, getting the kids to be reunited with their parents.
Right.
Sometimes that looks like it's so far down the road that it's not even a possibility.
Right.
But you're an eternal optimist, right?
Well, we feel that people can change. We're therapists and social workers, and we feel that families can change, and we feel that we have the ability to map out that roadmap for them, to help them to get back to where they were. Because there was a time that they were healthy. Most of our families, when we go back into their history, we find out that there was a time that they were healthy, and what happened, you know, and how did they get...
And the kids were well taken care of.
Right, very often. And so we try to help them get back to that place, and if not, then we have other options that we look at relatives, we can look for adoption and other things. But the very first thing we want to do is try to help families. It really is very sad for us anytime that a family breaks apart and a child has to come to JAFCO.
Well, the Northeast chapter, you can reach that. We'll put that information on the screen now. You can reach them by calling 610-525-1040, 610-525-1040. And the website is very helpful. That's www.jafco.org. Now, let's get some of Sarah Franco's background. You're a social worker, but where did you grow up? Where did you go to college?
Well, I was actually born in Israel, as I mentioned earlier, because my parents...
Oh, I didn't realize
Yeah,
that.
they were sent over there.
What country did your parents originate in?
From Poland. Right, so when they came out of the concentration camps, all of the children that were orphaned, there were different Jewish agencies that existed in those days. Interestingly, we were probably better organized as a Jewish community then than we are now, because the government was not involved in taking care of children, so the Jewish community did. As soon as the government stepped in, it appears that the Jewish community stepped out. So now we're kind of here to say we need to come back and really kind of reinvent what was here in the early 1900s. But so I lived in Israel, and then we moved to America when I was 2, and when I was 12, my brother was drafted into Vietnam, and my parents had had enough war, so we moved to Toronto for a while and lived there for about 10 years, and then came back to Florida to do my master's degree and ended up staying there.
Where did you do your undergraduate work?
At York University in Toronto.
In Toronto. And you majored in social work?
In psychology, yes, and then it's the same at Nova University in Fort Lauderdale as a master's.
How did you get to Fort Lauderdale?
I think it was cold in Toronto, so just needed you can relate to that after this winter.
After
right?
this winter, I can certainly relate to
Right.
that. I always made fun of friends who wintered in Florida. I don't make fun of them anymore. I so desperately wish, because there were so many weeks where I was stuck in my house for like 3-4 days till the gardeners, men with the strong backs and strong shoulders, came to shovel and spread rock salt. And when it's 8 degrees out, why go outside? I couldn't breathe. Got a lot of work done on my computer, but I didn't like being a prisoner in my own house. This was one of the worst winters probably the worst winter I ever recall.
Right. Right before I moved to Florida, I worked as a group home house parent for an agency called Browndale. It was in a ski town in northern Ontario in Canada. And so I did that as well, and then decided to come back and do my master's and really figure out, what I wanted to do. But also worked with children who'd been abused and very seriously abused and neglected. And it was a very good learning experience, and really has helped me a lot in creating the village in JAFCO.
Now, let's talk about the guy who donated the land, because that's the most amazing story.
Yes, so our founder, the family, their last name is Simon, and they're a founding family. They're from Miami Beach, and they put up the seed dollars to really create JAFCO. And,
a lot of, many seed dollars, right?
Right, yes. And for the first 10 years, we did not have a village. We opened very similarly to the way that we're doing our Philadelphia office.
Oh, by the way, our Philadelphia regional office is in Bryn Mawr, just down the street from Bryn Mawr Hospital. There's a nice, like 3-story red brick building, and we have a beautiful suite of offices. We had a lot of donors locally who gave, cheap rent for a huge complex, and donated the most gorgeous furniture, nicer than anything in my house, I want to tell you that. But one of our donor sons decided he was changing the furniture in his downtown office, and he donated everything. I mean, it's gorgeous, gorgeous stuff.
So we're so lucky to do that. So yeah, so we're really just recreating the model that worked for us, and starting off very, very slowly. But for the first 10 years, JAFCO we did not have that beautiful village that you described. We had just an office and 1 or 2 social workers, and we started off doing family strengthening and preservation, foster care, and adoption. And it wasn't until 10 years later that we recognized that we were missing some children, especially in the Jewish community, that we were not serving in those 3 programs, and that what we really needed was an emergency shelter and some group homes for children who did not fit well within a foster or adoptive home. Not everybody can manage living with an alternate family, depending on what their abuse has been, and sometimes it's just too much for them.
And the most amazing thing is you give them not just a Jewish history background, you give them Hebrew school, you give them bar and bat mitzvah lessons. I remember seeing a project that one of the girls who had just been bat mitzvah had done in one of the group homes. But I also, it made a lasting impression on me. In one of the homes you took us into, there was a framed photograph of a beautiful 26-year-old young woman. Goldstein was the last name. And tell the story about the Goldsteins and their connection with JAFCO.
Yeah, that was a very tragic story. So in 9/11, Michelle was a former resident of South Florida, and she and her husband met in Fort Lauderdale and moved to New York. And her dream had been always to work in Manhattan, and she landed a job in one of the towers. And then
The World Trade Center.
Yes, and then unfortunately on the day of the attack, she called her mom, who's one of our donors, one of our chapter leaders, and said, "Mom, something's going on." And her mom said, "Get out." And she said, "No, they're telling us just to stay put, we'll be fine." And then, of course, she died. So her husband, having just been married for 7 months, received some insurance money and didn't really know what to do with it.
Not some insurance money. $250,000 was given to the families of all the victims.
Right, and that happened to be the donation price point of naming one of the group homes. We were in the process of our capital campaign then, and he thought that it might be best if he just did something that would allow him to really bring some meaning to her life. And since they had not had a chance to have children, that this is what they did. And the nice thing is it is her home, and every year on 9/11, the girls, it's a girls' home. We have 5 girls living in the home, and they write a letter to her mother to let her know how much living there has changed their lives. So it's really meaningful. And of course, many of us have gone on with our lives, but for those families who lost a loved one in 9/11, it gets harder every year rather than easier.
That's very interesting. Time does not heal all wounds.
That's true.
It
It's
really
true.
doesn't. It really doesn't. Yes, when I went to high holiday services after 9/11, there were about a half a dozen members of my synagogue who had lost relatives, a brother, a sister-in-law, a niece in the 9/11 catastrophe. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Well, you're in the center of the action politically because you got Marco Rubio, who's going to announce, I think, as we're taping this, I think he's supposed to announce today,
I saw
day
that
after
this morning.
Hillary. But I'm so ready for Hillary. I've been ready for Hillary since 1995 when I was with the First Lady in Beijing for the 4th United Nations Conference on Women, and saw her in action a number of times there, and she's just wonderful. Anyway, and I'm sure that she would be very open to discussions about Jewish adoption and family care options.
Well, hopefully,
Anything, because she wrote that book, It Takes a Village, and now that she's a grandmother, she really is interested in future for the children. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, usually child abuse is really a bipartisan issue, and usually we get
Yes.
support for it, regardless of who is. It's something that everybody can feel and everybody can touch. So we're, the most important thing is that we keep the issue at the forefront so that we can keep kids from dying, because there are 5 children every day in the country that die at the hands of abuse. It's probably more than that.
Oh, my.
But there are 5 that are reported at least. Yeah.
Oh, my. But because it's a private charity, you don't get funds from the state for most of JAFCO, correct?
We do get some government funding, about 20%. Most charities are, 100%
Yes.
or 90%. By choice, we do partner with the government because foster care is a government function, and we want to make sure that legally that we have all of the right credentials, all of the right background so that we are doing it according to state guidelines. But then from a funding perspective, we go to the Jewish community, who is basically the community that is funding us. And we raise money in all sorts of ways so that we can provide programs that we find are necessary. And that's what we're going to do. It's what we have been doing in Philly, as you know, since you're part of the chapter, and we're going to continue to do that.
I love reading the articles in the Sun Sentinel in Lauderdale. They cover everything you do, Sarah, everything your chapters do, whether they have a golf outing, a luncheon, a ball. Talk about the ball that you have in December. How many hundreds of people show up for that?
Yeah, so we have a gala. Like many charities, we do lots of events, and our annual gala has about 450 people.
Ooh.
And we have to raise about $5 million a year now, so that's a lot of events. But we're happy to do it because it's for the kids and the community. It makes everybody feel part of the project, and it's not just an agency doing it, because our model is that it's not the agency, it's the community that takes care of the kids.
How many staff people do you have currently?
There's about 100 of us total in all
That's
of the
a big
programs.
staff.
It is
That's
a big staff. It is
because
a big staff.
one of the things you do also, there are a lot of times when the grandparents are raising the children
Yes.
because the parents are out of it for whatever reason. Sometimes they're in jail, sometimes they're dealing with an addiction habit, and the grandparents take over. And I remember seeing a session where you were training the grandparents what to do and how to do it and how to take care of the kids, because all of a sudden, you know, if you're in your 70s and 80s and you got to take care of a little kid, it's been a long time since you knew what to do with little kids, right?
It is really hard. One of the programs that we have is a grandparent, a caregiver support for grandparents who are raising their grandchildren. And that is a program that we could also begin to offer here if we found that it was needed. And the sad thing that happens, unfortunately, when you have an adult child that suffers from mental illness or drug addiction, it often falls on the grandparents to take care of the grandchildren. They could let the child go to foster care or adoption, but sometimes they just can't. They just don't have it in their heart to do it. But the sad thing that happens is then they're not grandma and grandpa anymore. They're not really mom and dad, and they end up falling in this in-between position that's very difficult for them, and it's a loss. You know, in our support groups that we have every 2 weeks for the grandparents, there's a lot of crying that goes on. There's lots of tears. But the wonderful thing is that they support each other, because nobody really understands what they're going through except another grandparent and just how hard it is. And we try to make sure that we give them the support that they need and also lots of breaks. So we make sure that the children are in aftercare, so at least Monday through Friday until 6 o'clock they can rest. During spring break.
Sure, because it's exhausting.
It is exhausting, and especially as a senior. This is not the time of life that you're supposed to be raising a 2-year-old.
Right.
And we make sure that they have summer camp and also spring break and winter break camp, so that they, as much respite and break time as we can give them.
Now, I want to tell our viewers how smart Sarah Franco is. One of her star social workers was, a few years ago, a young woman named Raina Bell. But Raina found a husband on the main line, and Raina moved to the main line. And Sarah said, I don't want to lose this star social worker. Raina, go start a chapter in the Philadelphia region and include South Jersey, include Long Island, and that's what Raina did. And that's how I got involved, because in South Jersey, my husband and I have a little vacation in the studio apartment in Ventnor, and there were friends who winter in Florida who were very aware of JAFCO and are involved in JAFCO. Mm-hmm. And when they were planning their very first fundraiser down the shore, Cocktails for a Cause, they grabbed me one night and said, Bonnie, you could do all the publicity for us pro bono. So I did, and I said, what's JAFCO? And then I found out and fell in love with it, you know. And but Rain is doing an amazing job. Let me put all that information on the screen again. If you're interested in volunteering, in donating, whatever, coming to our luncheon, I'll put this up. We're having our, which luncheon is this? It's our 5th annual Spring into Summer Luncheon on May 14th, and we're having it at a new venue this year. We're having it at the Sheraton Valley Forge. It's just past the King of Prussia Mall. Can't miss it, on the way to the casino, but before you get to the casino. And we get, I think we had 350 people there last year. We had to move to a bigger venue because we expect to have like 400 people this year.
That's awesome.
And it's just wonderful. And our honorees this year are 2 local broads that are very generous and very philanthropic. And it's a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law team. It's Marcia Cohen and her daughter-in-law, and I just lost her name.
Ruthie Cohen.
Ruthie, okay, but Ruthie, R-U-T-H-I, right? Yes. Marcia and Ruthie Cohen, and we expect to have 400 people there.
Yes, it'd be wonderful. And and I want to say to you, Bonnie, too, that without your help, I don't think we would be where we are, because the publicity that you've given us, there was no way. Well, first of all, we don't pay for advertising and publicity because we're a charity. We don't have that. All the money that we do raise, we give towards the children. But without that, we would never have grown to the place where we could be actually at a point where we're starting to offer services. So it's really all your fault. So we really appreciate it.
But I have to say, I've been aided and abetted by Joan Bang, who's one of the society editors of Mainline Media News, the paper that I work for, Mainline Times and Suburban Life. She's a grandparent who's raising her grandchild. And the first time I took her to a JAFCO event, she got so excited. So she comes to all of our events, and she does a big photo spread in the newspaper, which is wonderful. And then, of course, I write my column about it and send out the press releases. But Joan is an example of the kind of person who would benefit from JAFCO. And I hope people will call, because just come and take a tour of our office to see. And we have a wonderful social worker. Rachel got married, and I just forgot her married name.
Levy.
Levy. Now it's Rachel Levy, much easier than what her maiden name was. And Rachel and Raina, by the way, have been busy going out in the community, making presentations, meeting with all kinds of groups in synagogues and charities to let them know that JAFCO is on the scene, and Federation is now very much aware that JAFCO is on the scene, and we're hoping that one of these days we'll be under the umbrella of the Jewish Federation of Greater Philadelphia as well. But the phone number for our office is 610-525-1040. That's 610-525-1040. And you can find out a lot of information if you go to www.jafco.org. And if you Google that, you'll see a lot of stuff. And you can sign up for the gorgeous newsletter that Sarah puts out. And she uses a lot of my pictures in there.
We do. Yeah, we do.
But there are chapters all over Florida and New York, Long Island, South Jersey, Philadelphia. And Trump's, the gorgeous facility that he took over where you have your ball each year, what's it called?
Mar-a-Lago.
Mar-a-Lago. Yeah. Oh, wow.
It's beautiful there.
Just beautiful.
Yeah, he actually walked in on one of our events, and it was right in the middle of our live auction. And then the nice thing, it was nice that he came, but unfortunately he completely destroyed our auction because everybody stopped bidding, and all they wanted to do was take a quick photo with him. But he was very gracious and took photos with everyone for a few minutes, and then he left. Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So
did he buy anything?
No, he didn't. And actually, we were auctioning off one of his daughter's pieces of jewelry. So he said that
Ivanka.
he was, and he said he was going to start the bidding on it, but he just came for the photos and
forgot.
left. But we don't really have a lot of celebrities, even though it's been 22 years. Our celebrities really are people like yourself and all of the chapter leaders in Philadelphia and the other chapters who really spend just countless hours, really just helping us and helping the kids.
Our guest today has been Sarah Franco, who's the founding executive director of JAFCO, and we'll see everybody next week.
Thank you.